All right, land trust. Never ever end getting questions on land trust, and that's okay because I had to hear it about 7 times before I ever used it as well. There are lessons on your Go Club site on land trust. You go up, just to open the home page, and you go up top, put in the top search box land trust. Here comes a whole bunch of lessons on land trust, and it would pay you to spend a little time learning about them because they're an important part of your entity structuring, because they are how you're going to take title to single family houses in 50 states in the union. You're going to take title to every house in its own individual land trust. You should refer that to as a grantor revocable trust. Write those words down. Grantor revocable trust. And then more attorneys will understand what you're talking about. One of the issues with land trust is ignorance in the marketplace, and that includes a lot of your closing agents. And you may or may not have an issue with that. Some areas they're very, very common. Some areas, okay, they're not so common. But if you use grantor revocable trust, any real estate closing attorney that doesn't know what that means is not a real estate closing attorney. Okay, there's 4 big advantages of using it. There are really no disadvantages of using it. A land trust does not require a EIN number or a tax return or an annual filing or an annual fee, and they're so pathetically easy to form. You will probably not be forming one when taking title to properties from sellers, because the minute you fill out the deed that I'm getting to here in a minute, or more importantly, your attorney fills it out and records it, you have established a land trust. People ask me all the time, how do you open a land trust? You use the deed that in my book are one similar to it. And when a deed is recorded, you have opened a land trust. Okay. There's no fees to pay. And there's absolutely no tax consequences whatsoever. You will pay the same amount of taxes whether your property is in a land trust or whether it's in your name. It's a see-through entity. I read that in the code myself. All right. Number 1 is privacy. When you take title to a property into a land trust, the land trust owns the house, you own the land trust, or whoever you choose owns the land trust, which we're going to get to. Nowhere on public record does it show who owns the land trust. It only shows the trustee's name as trustee, which is usually an LLC, as trustee, depending on what state you live in. Some states require an individual. Some states are okay with an LLC. Florida is one of them that are okay with an LLC. So the deed will only say ABC LLC as trustee. That's the only thing that shows on the deed. Beneficiary shows nowhere. It's not on the deed. Therefore, you have privacy. The whole world does not know who owns this trust. In fact, the trust agreement is in your filing cabinet at home, and that's where all the evidence is. There's no place else is recorded. Unlike an LLC, you can go to the state records and you can see who owns the LLC. Not true for a land trust. So you have absolute, total privacy. If a judgment were to come down against you and you own property in your name on public record, the minute that judgment is recorded, it's going to attach to your house. So if that same house is in a trust and that judgment comes against you, that lien will not attach to a house you do not own. You do not own the house. The land trust owns the house. And that includes an IRS tax lien. So you have lien attachment protection. No lien against you will attach to a house you do not own. And from this day forward, I hope you never own another house again as long as you live, as long as you live. People die, trust don't die. If husband and wife, for example, are beneficial interest of a trust and husband dies, nothing changes. Nobody, there is no probate. There's nothing to file downtown. Nothing changes. Wife just takes over and business as usual. And then when wife gets ready to sell house, if the closing agent wants to see a copy of the trust, all wife has to do is show a copy of the trust and a death certificate for her husband. She won't deed the property away because the trustee is the only person that signs the deed when the trust is selling the property. That trustee might be your own LLC, or if it's a human, it's whoever you appoint as trustee. So you have probate avoidance. If I want to sell you a house and my house is in a trust and you understand this trust thing, all I have to do is whip up an assignment of beneficial interest, fill it out, and hand it to you, and you now own my trust. Nothing changes at the courthouse. Trust still owns the house. I just sold you the trust. There are no closing costs. There's no transfer tax. And in fact, the whole world doesn't even know it happens, except you and I, until we both report it to our accountants with our end of the year business, because it is a sale. It's a sale the same as if I deeded you the property, and it is a taxable event. But as far as the rest of the world goes, they don't even know a transfer. So it's easy to transfer a trust from one person to the other, as long as both parties know what this trust stuff is. I can tell you right now, you're probably not going to transfer a trust to owner occupants. They don't understand it. They'll think it's a scam, and I wouldn't even bother asking. I just have my trust deeded to them when it's time to sell the house. And of course, if they're getting a loan, you have no choice anyway. That's lender's going to require. Speaking of which, if you own a property in a trust and you want to go to the bank and refinance it and ignore all my warnings about personally guaranteed debt, they're going to require you to take it out of the trust, then close the loan, and then you can put it back in the trust. The lender cannot stop you from putting your home into a land trust or any other property for that matter. It's against the law for them to try. It's called the Garn-St. Germain Federal Depository Institution Act of 1982. Garn-St. Germain Federal Depository Institution Act of 1982 prohibits a lender from calling a loan due when you put a property into a trust for estate planning purposes. It's also the law that gave teeth to the due on sale clause, but there's a bunch of exceptions that were laid out in that same ruling. So you don't need a lender's permission to put a property into a trust. So if you want to put your own property into a trust, all you've got to do is take this deed and fill it out and record it, and voila, you don't own the property anymore. The trust owns the property. And then we'll talk a minute about who is going to own the trust. So I get asked all the time, do I need an attorney to put my property into a trust? No. Let's take a look at this deed and you tell me if you need an attorney to fill it out. At the top, we start with the seller's name. That would be you if the property's in your name. And then we have a trustee. That would be your LLC or somebody else that you want to be your trustee. Frankly, you don't have to trust them all that much, because all they ever do is sign the deed when you sell. And if they act up, you can fire them with an appointment of successor trustee document that's right on your Gold Club site, and appoint another one. So they don't have a whole lot of power. It calls for the date, it calls for the county that the property's in, and it calls for the legal description. So far, do we need an attorney to fill in those blanks? Well, they'd be thrilled to take your money if you do. Now, if you look up at the top of the one in your book, all that junk ain't on, it's not on the deed that you pull off the Gold Club site. But in the upper left-hand corner of the deed, you need to put a prepared by and a return to, so the courthouse will know where to send the deed once it's recorded. You go down and record this, they don't generally just record it right there and hand it back to you. They put in a pile of crap and they record it next day or whatever, and then they mail it to you. And you'll need the legal description. You cannot file, this deed is worthless without the legal description in there. And of course, you get that off of your deed or your mortgage or one of the papers that are in your pile of paperwork. So now, what does it cost to put your property into a trust? And here in Florida, it costs about $20. Okay. It does not trigger transfer tax. You have the right to put your property into a trust without paying transfer tax. But there's a minimum here in Florida. It's about $20. Okay. No, it's actually about $20 to record the deed. Now, if you look at the next page, well, looky here. Only the seller signs the deed. There's no place for the buyer to sign. And that's any deed, not just this deed. So if husband and wife own the house, husband signs it, wife signs it, must be notarized. Everything that you record at the courthouse has to be notarized, whatever that thing is. So you just need to sign it and notarize it and take it down and record it. And the minute you do, you don't own the house anymore. Again, nothing changes tax-wise. But then you get those protections that those benefits that I just described. But Ron, what if somebody convinces me I did something evil, and I want it out of the trust? Well, if you put it in the trust, you can have your trustee deed it right back to you just as fast as you deeded it away into the trust. There's no downside of putting your property into a trust, but there's absolutely a bunch of upsides. And you're going to ask me, but Ron, what about my residence? Should I put my residence into a land trust? The answer is, in my opinion, absolutely so. Absolutely. Now, in Florida, if somebody gets a judgment against me, they can't take my home away from me. However, judgments can still attach to my home. What happens when I get ready to sell? Okay, and then I become the screwee. So in Florida, I can get that judgment removed from my home. But frankly, if I don't own the home, the judgment would never attach to begin with. And that's the whole point. I haven't owned a home in, I don't need 40 years. I don't own any homes. I don't own anything. You'll find nothing in my name because I insist on it. Just remember this. They cannot take what you do not own. Doesn't mean you don't control it. Next page. This is your agreement and declaration of trust, also on your website. On your Go Club site. Now, this is the one that goes in your filing cabinet at home. And this thing is 7 pages long. Holy moly. Well, let's start with the top of this thing. Again, we have the date, and we have the trustee, and we have the beneficiary. And in this case, we named the trust. The trust, this one is named the Maple Street Trust, because I imagine the property is located on Maple Street. Name it whatever you want, or don't name it at all, because it does not matter. Now look at that page, no more blanks. Next page, no blanks. Next page. Oop, got one blank. It calls for the compensation of the trustee. Mine only makes $10 a year. Frankly, they don't have to make anything. Next page. All right. It calls for reimbursement of the trustee's expenses. None, because the trustee won't have any expenses. Next page. Oh, got to put the county and state and county in there again. Then the next page. Okay, here is where we name the beneficiaries. We name the beneficiaries, but so far we haven't even described their interest yet. Does not have to be notarized. Doesn't hurt if it would, but doesn't have to be. It's not going to get recorded ever. Next page, this is where we put the legal description of the property. And the next page, this is where we identify the ownership interest of each trustee, which we're going to talk about here in just a second. Trust agreement, extremely simple. Simple, simple, simple. Trust deed, simple, simple, simple. Might want to run the trust deed by your attorney one time, see if they want to add anything. In California, for example, I know you'll need a grant deed to trustee, not a warranty deed to trustee, but it's got pretty much the same language in it. The language in the deed establishes the fact that the property is owned by a trust. The trust agreement establishes all the terms of the trust. Beneficiaries have total control and ownership of the trust.